On the eve of spring camp, we get together once again. It's time to smash it up on a Monday night. This is the Monday Smash, presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, alongside Ira Schoffel, managing editor of Warchant.com. Ira was around all of the coaches today, Florida State's football coaches. My name is Tom Lang from Warchant North headquarters. This is a great time, Ira. I watched all of the stuff on Warchant TV. I watched Mike's press conference, the assistant coaches. We have all that coverage head to toe. You're here to get breakdown of it. So if you haven't watched those videos out there in Warchant TV land, make sure to stop by the channel afterwards. But Ira, I wanted to get your sense. You're in the room. You feel the vibes. You feel the excitement, the anticipation. What was it like at the coaches' luncheon today?
Yeah, it's a confident bunch, man. I really, you get that sense just talking to them on the record, and also just kind of when we were chit-chatting a little bit before we actually started doing the interviews. They're a real confident bunch. I mean, you go across the board. They're even the positions where, we have some questions about, replacing guys who played a lot of football. They're all quick to point out that we've got a lot of guys, that this is them saying we've got a lot of guys coming back who've played a lot of football, not always at Florida State, sometimes it's at other schools, but they feel like they've got a ton of depth and a ton of options. I mean, the story, really is the same across numerous positions, whether it's wide receiver. I think Ron Dugans said that he thought they're deeper than they've been in the past, and they've got more speed than they've had in the past. John Papucha is talking about defensive ends. He says that he thinks they may have more depth than they've had in the past. Although, we still have to see what the top end players look like, whether or not Patrick Payton or any of these new guys can play like a Jared Verse or Jermaine Johnson. But the depth is something they're really excited about. And then just across the board, they're very fired up about the way the guys worked in tour of duty. Again, man, this time of year, everybody's excited, but you can tell that this coaching staff, it's not a situation where they're coming off a 13-0 season and wondering, okay, what's the drop off going to be? I mean, they seem to really believe this team's going to be not that they're predicting 13-0, but they think this is that going to be that level of a team, which is exciting because, we'll see it firsthand tomorrow.
It seems like a theme to me, Ira, just in watching all of these interviews and listening to you discuss it, listening to Jeff discuss it a little bit today earlier on the show, is the quantity of talent is higher. Like there are more bodies that are capable of playing at the top end of the Power 5 level. They just need some stars to emerge. Like that seems to be the theme early on. And they've got players that have, either recruiting profiles or they've shown the potential on the field in limited circumstances. Patrick Payton's kind of an exception to that rule, but there are a lot of other guys that, especially on that defensive line, that have either dominated in stretches, have been all-conference type players, or they came out of high school and they were a 5-star player like Marvin Jones Jr. It just, the defensive line is kind of emblematic. Like, you've got more guys there, but are they better on the front line? I think that's the debate that we're going to get to see play out over spring camp and fall camp is, yeah, there are more of them, but how good are the top end guys on the roster across all these positions?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the big story at a lot of positions. But, again, like I wrote a defensive backs preview that people could see. It was up on the site this morning. It was the last of our position previews, offense and defense. And as I was writing that story, I mean, it's kind of crazy. I mean, you lost 3 guys to the draft, Jarian Jones, Renardo Green, and Akeem Dent, or lost them. Their eligibility is up. At least 2 of them will get drafted, we think, later this month. But they've got 16 DBs. And of those 16 DBs they've got in this camp, 7 of them have played a ton of football, have started a bunch of games. And so it's and then some of the guys who haven't started, they're super high on as well. I mean, Earl Little coming in and some of those guys. So it's kind of like, this time of year, a lot of times media and fans kind of get excited about what the talent looks like, whether we're right or not. I'm imagining in a world, 20 years ago, if there was a Sunday Smash or Monday Smash, we might have been talking about Bud Thacker coming in and Kendrick Stewart coming in and been real excited, right? Guys from your era. But to hear it from the coaches, like that they're this excited and they've scouted these guys and they've been watching them work for the last 2 or 3 months, it just gives a little bit more legitimacy to it. Like, again, we all would normally be excited this time of year because, just the hope of a new season, a new spring. But these guys have seen these athletes and they've coached them, some of them for multiple years, and they're super excited. So that's cool.
You had to bring up a name that really brought me back to those days of no rivalry wins at Doak Campbell Stadium in my undergrad years. I appreciate that, Ira.
It wasn't our fault. We love you, bud. We love you, Kendrick. But
it it was an era, and Florida State's emerging from an era that was actually worse than that period of time in terms of wins and losses. And I think that's part of it, Ira. This is why I'm so fired up about this. Is these guys, these coaches have developed, have coached, have worked with players that again, I'll go to the defensive line, it's low hanging fruit, but like first round type players at edge rusher, and yet they're fired up about the guy behind him. Like so, and that extends to all position groups. Florida State is sending dudes to the draft. Florida State, these coaches have been around dudes who have been in the NFL at the NFL level, and yet Mike Norvell says something today like, "This was the best or one of the best winter conditioning programs I've ever been a part of." Yeah. And Mike Norvell set a pretty high standard at Memphis, and those guys lived up to whatever their potential was to get them to a New Year's Six bowl when he was there. And they were a high achieving program when he took it over from Justin Fuente. So he's seen some things at previous institutions. And then here at Florida State, that team last year that went through winter conditioning just went 10-3, was on the way to going 13-0. So he's seen a lot of good talent around here. But the way he said that, Ira, during his press conference of how proud he was with the tour of duty, that stood out to me because they lost a lot of their natural leadership year over year. So maybe that's part of it. But these guys have seen NFL players. They just sent a bunch of them off, and yet they're really excited about the talent that's coming out and playing this spring.
Yeah, and I think one thing that also comes through, and it was kind of on the periphery today, but it was mentioned more than once. But they're at a point now where this is like a legitimate bona fide program now. This is not a coaching staff who came in and had some success. This is not a coaching staff who came in and struggled a little bit, then had some success. This is a program now where they're in year 5. And so the pride on Adam Fuller's face when Jarian Jones and Renardo Green came up into the meeting room where all the coaches were doing their have to be up there. Like a lot of those guys are back this week because Pro Day is on Friday.
We'll see if we can get Ira's connection back in just a second. But
yeah,
you conked out for just a minute. No, but there we go. He's back.
You're back.
But we can hear mostly what you were saying about how Adam Fuller is beaming when former players that, they might be here for Pro Day. Right. They take the time to come find him. They come find him. Exactly. They want to be around him.
Exactly. They made their way up to the 4th floor where we were doing our interviews, and they spent time with all the coaches. They were, just you could tell the genuine appreciation they have for what they accomplished here. And then he talked about it. John Papuchis talked about it. Mike Norvell talked about it. How cool it was watching Jermaine Johnson and Jared Verse hanging out downstairs in the coaches' offices. Just, those guys didn't even play together. But part of the reason Jared Verse came to Florida State was because of Jermaine Johnson. Part of the reason probably Sione Lolahea and Durajaye and those guys, Marvin Jones even, came to Florida State is because of what Jared Verse did and because Jermaine did. So they're at a point now where it's a real program. And I think the residuals of that is when a guy like, Shaheem Brown now is the leader of the secondary. Like he knows what it's supposed to look like because he's seen it from these other guys before him. Same thing with DJ Lundy. He's trying to be what Tatum Bethune and Kalen DeLoach were for him. And so they're in a good spot right now. As long as the talent keeps staying at a high level, which they think it has, you really can kind of sustain some success.
Yeah, it's so weird in modern times with college football with the transfer portal that, a guy like Jermaine Johnson loves Florida State so much. Like, he was here for 1 year, and it's like, man, you must have really loved the hell out of that 1 year because every chance you get, you're back at the program. But now it's starting to multiply. Like, for example, Ira, with our recruiting coverage and the transfer portal coverage, Jared Verse was here to welcome kids who were looking at coming to Florida State for 2024. As they arrived on campus in some circumstances in December and January. Like he was there at the Moore Center. The pride that the kids take, it makes it so much easier to root for the kids in an era where they transplant from place to place when stories like that happen. And it allows me to segue briefly. If you feel like Jermaine Johnson's the OG of Mike Norvell's culture and what he's trying to build in terms of athletic prowess and loyalty to the program, well, Russ Voorhis, State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, is one of the OGs here at Warchant.com and Warchant TV. He supports and sponsors the Monday Smash. He has for almost a year now. And you can find Russ in the brick and mortar management side of things, Jacksonville Beach, Orange Park. You can see those phone numbers at the bottom of the screen. But if you're listening on the podcast, go to russvorhis.com, RussVorhis.com, to find out where you can talk to Russ, call Russ. And if you live in the state of Florida, Georgia, or Alabama, you're all covered by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. So give him a phone call today or head to russvoorhis.com for more information. The good thing about Russ, Ira, is that he consumes what we're talking about just like I would as a grad if I wasn't working right now. Like, Russ is as diehard as it gets. So my guess is he's consumed everything Warchant TV's put out today, because if you want to support a Nole fan, there are a few larger Nole fans than Russ Voorhis.
Yeah, it's a nice thing. He called me the other day to talk some business, talk about the sponsorship and some business issues. And then at the end of it, I think we got to what he really wanted to know. He had some questions about the team, some questions about certainly encourage people to support his business and at least give him a chance.
We lost Ira's connection again. But again, head to russvorhis.com, russvorhis.com. Today, again, state of Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, you're covered by our friend Russ Voorhis. We got you back, Ira. So back to the point at hand, what we were talking about was that passing of the torch from group to group. It could be class to class or segment group to segment group over a period of time. It does seem like Florida State has gotten to a place where it is player-led. You often hear that from coaches and coaching staffs where they talk about it's a player-run program, not a coach-run program. This was a big test this offseason because of how much veteran leadership. I mean, just look at the sheer numbers of dudes that are going to be walking out on the stage, or they're going to be getting a phone call that they're drafted or that they're signed as undrafted free agents to the NFL level. This was an offseason where if there was a crack in the armor of leadership and it wasn't passed down the right way, you might have seen evidence of it. But these coaches are beaming about the accountability that they've seen.
Yeah, I think so across the board. And if I drop out again, man, I'm going to switch my Wi-Fi. So just give me a second to do that. Maybe run Russ's commercial if we have to.
There we go. We'll run it a couple of times. Yeah, we'll run it back to back.
But yeah, no, you hear that across the board. But there's also some, not pressure, but they're also looking to some of those guys who are leaders and need to step up and putting some pressure on them from the standpoint of, okay, it's time now. When Ron Dugans was talking.
Looks like we are going to go ahead and switch that Wi-Fi. We'll be back in just 15 short seconds after this from our sponsor, Russ Voorhis.
Contact Russ Voorhis for an auto quote today.
Ira Schoffel is going to be switching his Wi-Fi system for a moment, and that gives me an opportunity to talk about what's coming up tomorrow. Tomorrow, if you are a Warchant.com subscriber, is an important day because you can save on baseball gear. That is right. Baseball gear. Our friends at Garnet and Gold have picked up right where you're feeling right now, locked into Florida State baseball. 25% off all Florida State baseball items tomorrow for Warchant subscribers. That's at garnetandgold.com, garnetandgold.com. You will get a code if you're a Warchant subscriber on the Warchant Tribal Council. 25% off all Florida State baseball gear. And in fact, I'll give you a little bit of product placement. Director Ben, you can pull down that little graphic because I got me right here. Look at this, Ira. Last time I was in town for the wedding, I got one of the away uniforms because I'm playing away games as an employee at Warchant.com. These things are sweet. The Sunday Golds look outstanding. If you're a Warchant subscriber, you save. We give you the value back of being a Warchant subscriber, Ira, with great content and deals like that from our friends at Garnet and Gold.
25% off is nice.
Yeah, that's some serious savings right there. Buy 4 jerseys, one of them's free. There you go.
Exactly.
I believe that's how the math works out.
Hopefully my connection will last here. So, but back to what I was saying, they're also putting pressure on some of those guys to step up. Like Ron Dugans brought up Kentron Portier as a guy who he thought he was on the cusp of breaking out last year. We did too after watching spring practice. And basically he was like, okay, but now it's time. It has to happen. He had an injury. He got set back last year, but now it has to happen. Omar Graham's a guy that they said, this was interesting. If you watch the Randy Shannon interview, and it's kind of something I had kind of been hearing last year, was that they were really excited about Omar Graham at linebacker. And so much so that Randy Shannon said that DJ Lundy and Tatum Bethune and Kalen DeLoach were nervous about him stealing their reps because he was playing so well last camp, but then he got injured. And I think Adam Fuller said it was an ankle injury. and basically he played all year on a bad ankle. We didn't know that. We didn't report that. It was not like something we hid. We didn't know it. We just knew he wasn't playing well, and people were really down on Omar Graham. He says that in preseason camp, he looked like he was as good as anybody in that linebacker group. Well, now he's getting healthy again. So there's some guys like that have been in the program that they feel like can hit another level, and now is obviously the time to do it.
Yeah, there were a couple of things that Coach Fuller said that jumped out to me today. Number one, I'll get to in a second. The second one was about Omar Graham and the way he spoke about Omar's camp, his fall camp last year. The things he said was, I know what I saw in that camp. Okay, well, let's see what it looks like this spring. Let's see what it looks like in the fall. Because, Ira, if he turns into even just a top 3 linebacker like the rotation was last year, where you know that you can count on 36 to make plays in those situations, I feel like a lot of the pressure is taken off because there is a little bit of pressure right now. I think that is a pinch point about proving who that rotation is going to feature. Those 4 guys, whether it's Omar stepping up, Justin Cryer being a player, Blake Nicholson taking another step to go along with Sean Murphy, who has to, I mean, these are more scrimmage downs than he's going to have ever played in college football. He's mostly a special teamer. And DJ Lundy is your veteran anchor. Like there's a lot to sort out there. If Omar Graham has a good camp, I think that might settle them down in a couple of ways. Maybe they don't need to venture into the portal market in the spring. Maybe they like what they have. The other thing that stood out to me from Adam Fuller, I don't know if you saw this, but like the Earl Little comment that he made.
Yeah.
So he was talking about how Earl Little and Patrick Surtain said this as well, that Earl Little is going to play nickel corner for Florida State this spring, and that's pretty much exclusively where they want him to be. They want him to master that position. Adam Fuller said he is one of the best players I ever saw in high school. And he said, I trust that eval. Like, I believe that. And then we also got his coach as well, who fills in some of the blanks in Patrick Surtain, coming from the high school ranks to, by way of another place, Florida State University. It's interesting. Earl Little is somebody that Adam Fuller wasn't afraid to put expectations on, and he's brand new to the program.
Yeah, and that position, that nickel corner position is going to be fascinating. And basically, Earl Little, that was one of the questions we had, is where he's going to line up, because coming out of high school, he was a big-time cornerback prospect. He played slot corner at Alabama. We wondered if maybe he may get a look at safety at Florida State or at slot corner. They're going to keep him at slot corner this spring, and they're really excited about him. But, man, you've got Kevin Noles, who's played a ton there. Greedy Vance has played a ton there. Edwin Joseph, who was really coming on last year. One other interesting kind of position note, Edwin Joseph came in and played mostly slot corner last year before he got hurt as a freshman. But it sounds like they want him back at outside corner too. So he's a guy that's going to probably cross train. But yeah, man, that nickel corner position is going to be fascinating. Safety is going to be fascinating. The one position I think if you had a question mark that I didn't come away from today feeling warm and fuzzy about, it might be the linebacker, just because Randy Shannon didn't jump to anoint Sean Murphy because he came from Alabama as the next great thing. Now, that's probably kind of who Randy Shannon is as a coach. He wants to see it on the field. But, we know that DJ Lundy can play. I believe DJ Lundy can play. Some people may not be super confident in him. I think he's a really good college linebacker. I think Omar Graham's got a chance. I like Nicholson and but they're still young. They're going into their second years. So Sean Murphy, you feel like really needs to be a key player there for them to be successful at linebacker. And, again, if Randy Shannon's excited about him, he wasn't going to share that today. He wants to see it on the field this spring, which is fair. As linebacker is not a position where you're going to get too excited about watching guys run around in drills. You want to see them stick their nose in there. You want to see how they diagnose plays, instincts, things like that. So that's probably – I came away from today still feeling very unsure of that linebacker position, just because I think they need at least one or two more sure things.
Yeah, to me, that's number one or number two on defense. The other one is safety. Like, it looks so different when Akeem Dent was not out there last year. So who's that other player going to be? But you're right, linebacker. I mean, most everybody who's concerned about anything on defense, they're looking at where those answers going to come from. Because the other part of it too, Ira, is I agree that DJ Lundy on first and second down running situations, without a doubt, already is a good college football player. Question is, when you get to some of those other situations, is he fit for those? Maybe yes, maybe no. But either way, he's going to help you as a player. When Deloach and Bethune at their first spring or fall camp, whenever they were both together for the first time on the field, Ira, like the communication level between the linebackers and then getting the front aligned, all those little details was outstanding, and it was night and day. Florida State had not had that quarterback-ish role on the field where they get guys lined up. They're not checking to something at the last second. They're caught unawares by a snap. Like, I just wonder what that's going to look like. That's something you got to not start from scratch, because Lundy's been there before, but he's going to have to build a chemistry with whoever he's going to work next to. Comprehensively, that has to be number one. And I think the second part is also safety. Shaheem Brown's got one spot on lock, but who is ready to play center field? Conrad Hussey got a ton of reps there. Ashlyn Barker early in the season got some reps there too. But who is that player going to be? Because it's a really important position to make sure everybody's aligned and communicating well.
Yeah, I actually feel a little bit better about safety personally, just because I do think I agree with you that Akeem Dent did a good job there last year, but the other guys that were rotating there were not capable. So that's why I think it looked like such a big drop off. Kevin Noles played a lot of safety last year because they were desperate, but he wasn't healthy. It didn't look like he was healthy. It didn't look like he was capable physically of doing some of the things they needed in terms of run support. Well, he's not going to be back there this year. He's going to be back at nickel corner. Conrad Hussey was a true freshman last year. So now you talk about him being a second year in the program, KJ Kirkland, second year in the program, Ashlyn Barker, second year in the program, third year of college football. I just feel like that group is going to be a little bit more ready, to step in when they're called upon, as compared to what they were last year. So I think safety is going to work out okay, and they also have a couple other options that they can move there if they need to. But linebacker is a spot that it's going to be fun to watch, man. I'll say this: Randy Shannon doesn't seem panicked about it. I mean, he does seem like he feels like there's a lot of potential there, and I think everybody likes the young guys, Nicholson and Cryer, but it's just a matter of actually seeing them do it, because last year when they got thrown in, they were true freshmen.
Talked a lot about the defense so far tonight. Again, this is it's amazing the transformation from December to now, like how many more options they have. Signing class helps, and you get a couple of young defensive backs that we're all excited to see. But he brought in a lot of transfers, especially in that defensive front. We learned today that Tomiwa Durojaye might be flexing Ira to interior as well. He might be in a glorified Dennis Briggs type role, where who knows where he's going to end up. A lot of fun things to sort out there. And again, practice does start tomorrow evening. Florida State's first practice of spring is tomorrow evening. And we can't wait to give you the rundown of how everybody looks in some sort of shoulder pad, I would imagine, but it's not full shells just yet. But that coverage will be rolling out starting around 5 o'clock. Aslan and Ben will be taking footage from the field itself. Ira will be getting a lot of those photos from Gene Williams. And then also at 6:30, 7 o'clock interviews with Mike Norvell and all the players. But let's pivot to the offense. We talked a lot about the defense. You mentioned Ron Dugans and some of the things he talked about today. But you have a feeling of concern about a position on defense. Do you have a feeling of concern about a position on offense? Was there anything that didn't seem like a settled matter to you today?
Not really. I mean, I think, again, receivers are going to be one that we're paying so much attention to because there are so many new faces. But I feel like they've got so many possibilities there that I feel like some of those are going to pan out. I like the fact that Mike Norvell singled out Camden Fryer, because he was a guy when we were watching Tour of Duty really caught my eye. Is just impressive. Not that the other freshman receivers didn't look good, but that he kind of stood out in some of the things I was watching. But yeah, that receiver core, you talk about Malik Benson and Jalen Brown and those guys that are coming in, along with Hakeem Williams, Destin Hill. We heard some really good things today about Destin Hill and how much, now that he's fully healthy after last season, the injury he dealt with, he's really impressed. I thought, I think it was David Johnson, or it might have been Ron Dugans, talking about Destin Hill and said that you can tell the way Destin Hill is working this offseason that he wants to be the guy. Like that's what he said. He wants to be the guy. And that's, he's got a ton of talent, man. I thought Destin Hill physically last preseason camp, I mean, we were all blown away by what he looked like physically and the way he could run. It didn't really translate to the field. He hadn't played in a couple of years. Then he
may have lost Ira briefly again. But Destin, in the Orange Bowl, when he comes back, I'm going to ask Ira about the Orange Bowl specifically, because I thought he looked fresh in that particular setting. I thought in one instance, Brock Glenn just missed him deep down the field. But you got to see the speed of Destin Hill operate against the speed of a top flight SEC defensive backroom, which is, again, something that you're looking for proof wise. If you're saying, yeah, Destin Hill's fast, but how fast? Ira, I was just talking about the Orange Bowl itself and watching Destin's speed flash against Georgia's secondary. Like, he looked fresh then. Brock missed him on a deep post. There were very few opportunities for Florida State that day, but that was one of them where I said, oh, okay, like that. If that plays against Georgia, then you know that plays against anybody. So if Destin Hill does, if it does pan out in camp that he's that detail-oriented and buttoned up and polished, he could be the guy. I mean, that's the thing. We don't know who the guy is going to be. Malik Benson has the profile, but we don't know who the guy is going to be the number one player for Florida State at wide receiver.
Yeah, Malik definitely seems like the odds-on favorite based on, again, some of the things we saw at tour of duty, some of the things we've heard, his resume on paper, and then the way the coaches talk about him. I mean, Mike Norvell, the way he spoke about him after the tour of duty glowingly. Then today, several coaches talking about him as well. They're really excited about him, and they're really excited about the speed on offense. Alex Atkins and Mike Norvell both talked about how that was something they were really determined to do. They knew they were not fast enough. They didn't have enough game-breaking speed last year, other than Trey Benson and a couple guys. Now they feel like they've got several guys that can change a number on the scoreboard, and that changes the whole offense, man. I remember going back to, when Jimbo was here, and when they signed Dalvin Cook, he was so excited because and that's exactly what he said. Dalvin's a guy that can change the numbers on the scoreboard. And we saw that during his 3 years in Tallahassee, and that changes your offense. When you've got guys that you don't have to scheme up every yard, they can just take it to the house at any time, and they feel like they've got more of those guys now.
So I'll ask you about Malik Benson then. I found it interesting after the tour of duty. I think Josh Storms talked him up. Coach Norvell talked him up. And then again, it seems to have continued. The dude's always around the facility, and helping lead others. Where does Florida State, I mean, it could be a larger question. Where does Florida State get these guys that are perceived one and dones in some circumstances, very actually one and dones in others, that they just want to be a part of the machine and lead their program rather than act like a mercenary who's just here to go get paid?
Man, it's a great question. And I think that a lot of coaches around the country are looking at what Florida State's done. And I thought Mike Norvell had the great quote today. He said, people talk about our transfers, not because of the numbers, but because of how good they are. And it's true. I mean, they've done a great job of getting guys who can play, but then getting the right guys and the right fit. I mean, so much of the credit, I think, has to go to Derek Ray, who's the general manager of personnel, and some of the scouting staff that they have. They clearly do a ton of research before guys go in the portal to know who are guys they're interested in. And I think they've done a good job of staying away from certain guys who maybe wouldn't fit in that mode. But even a guy, to me, like the perfect example of a guy who you thought was coming to come in and get paid and leave was Keon Coleman. And, he's a guy that played a lot of football, had been successful at Michigan State. He comes in, he's only going to be here for 4 or 5 months, but even he was a great teammate the whole time he was at Florida State. You and I remarked about it a bunch of times walking off the practice fields about what a good teammate he was. And they were talking about, John Papuchis was talking about that today with Jared Verse and Jermaine Johnson. Jermaine Johnson, when he came in, that was kind of the perception. He was a mercenary, come in for 1 year, get ready for the NFL draft. And here he is 4 years later, still coming around the program and uplifting those younger guys. So I think part of it is identifying the right guys. I think their staff deserves a lot of credit for that. But then also, once you get that going, it becomes kind of contagious. And that's the expectation as opposed to the outliers. I mean, the guys who – I bet you there are guys that were here 4 or 5 years ago that if they came on the campus or went in the locker room now, they wouldn't really believe what this team is like compared to what it was, 5 or 6 years ago.
That's a good point. Now, but maybe Darius Washington can tell you because he was around then. There was a moment a couple of years ago. It was last year because Jermaine had just come back. Jermaine's eating like takeout, and he's walking around the grounds, and you saw a defensive end, I forget who it was, walk up and just ask him some advice. And, he's just like picking his brain about the NFL life, maybe the position, who knows. But he's just eating some food. He's living his best life. He's happy to be in Tallahassee. He's like, sure, let's talk about it. I'm like, what an invaluable resource that is. Like that is the power of the program as they've built it right now. And it looks like it's not stopping anytime soon. That's just, Ira, I'm so excited. Like next week, I get to come down. I get to see a practice on Tuesday. I'm just so fired up to see this product because they're deeper as a team. Like every coach didn't shy away from that sentiment. I heard Adam Fuller asked about it. I heard other coaches asked about, do you have more depth this year? And they all said, yeah, like that. They know that they're more equipped for the attrition, that the increasing attrition of a season where you're playing 13, 14, 15 games. If you're making it all the way to the end, they're fired up about that, and they should be. And that's why, again, we've got you covered here on Warchant TV, warchant.com. Tomorrow night here on Warchant TV, we'll have a live stream beginning right around 7 o'clock after the interviews conclude at the practice fields. I'll be hosting, but we're going to get feedback from 2 staff members who were there, and they saw it with their own eyes. Again, the first practice of the season is tomorrow for spring camp. So join us on Warchant TV tomorrow night, just around 7 o'clock. It's a little bit nebulous, Ira, because you never know when Mike is going to be done, how many players we get for interviews, but that's the time that y'all can join us, Eastern time, of course, on Warchant TV. About 700 of you plus, 700 plus across the different multimedia formats. We're in a lot of different places. Thank you for watching Monday Smash here, presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhees. We're going to pivot to your questions in just a second, but one more message from our friend Russ Voorhees.
Contact Russ Voorhees for an auto quote today.
Ira, before we get to those questions, some sad news today from Florida State's program. I know that a former quarterback of note sadly passed away.
Yeah, Steve Tensei, before our time, obviously, but a Florida State Hall of Fame member. He was the quarterback for people that are younger who don't remember. Some of our listeners and viewers will remember him. But he was basically the quarterback for part of Fred Biletnikoff's time at Florida State in the early to mid 1960s. So he was on the other end of a lot of those touchdowns. He also was the first quarterback to beat Florida for Florida State. The first time Florida State beat Florida, he was the quarterback, and he went on to play in the NFL. I didn't realize I believe, reading the obituary today, that he threw the first touchdown pass for the Denver Broncos when he was playing for them. And and he was apparently a really good guy. He's like I said, he's in the Florida State Athletics Hall of Fame, and never got a chance to meet him, but he passed away today at 81. So again, that was a great area that's kind of a little bit forgotten in terms of the fact that it was a passing offense back in the day before a lot of teams were, so many people give, Coach Bowden, obviously a ton of credit for the passing, and Steve Spurrier for passing, but Florida State in the 60s was throwing the ball a lot. And obviously Ron Sellers and Fred Biletnikoff and Steve Tensei was a big part of that.
Yeah, when you've got an award named after the passing game, in a sense, yeah, Florida State does have a legacy there. And I encourage all the younger viewers to take a look at some of the coaches that have been on the practice fields of Florida State at different stages of their career. It'll blow you away. It did when I got here, when I got to Tallahassee as a student about 20 years ago now. But what a legacy Florida State has that extends before that period of time. Our heartfelt condolences to the Tensei family and everybody affected by Steve's loss. Yes.
Can I touch on one thing from the last segment before we went to
sure.
Russ's commercial? So, you were talking about the culture, and one thing I think and I'll probably write about this, when the snub happened and all those guys opted out of the Orange Bowl, like that became a big focal point is, wait, we've been hearing about this culture, right? And I think that the players on the team, and I think the coaches, it shook a lot of people. I mean, because we're talking about how much these guys want to come back and how close this program is. And then you see what happened in the Orange Bowl, and it doesn't seem to compute because, well, why would they leave their teammates? And I think now the time is settled. I think we've written about some of this. I mean, we've interviewed, the Braden Fisks and Jaheim Bells and different guys about Jared Verse. I was talking to somebody on the staff today about Jared Verse. Jared Verse was that whole week kept saying, I want to play in the Orange Bowl. And his representation was basically saying, no, you're not going to go play in the Orange Bowl. That game doesn't mean anything. And you've got a bunch of NFL drills to get ready for. So, I hope a lot of people are understanding now that the fact that so many of those guys opted out does not mean the culture went bad or that the culture is not real in Florida State. I think the culture is very real. And I think we're seeing that the way these guys are coming in right now, the way they're pushing each other, because and again, you don't know how things like that are going to affect things in the long term. But I mean, again, just, talking to the coaches today, seeing some of those former players come back, I really feel like things are right back on track, and we'll see that better in spring practice. But that was definitely a legitimate concern, and I understand why people were concerned about it, and I wondered, but I feel like they've come through it pretty well, and I think we'll see that this spring.
Maybe that's part of the energy from the coaches is either faith restored or faith validated that, all their hard work was that they think is going to hold together, but then it did because they see how these guys reacted to the tour of duty. Ira, that feels like a lifetime ago, and it feels like yesterday. That period of time in December where the sky was falling and it just wouldn't stop.
Right.
But here we are finally on the eve of more real football in terms of practice, drills, and putting together the 2024 group. It's about time. Well, I think we were all starving, and usually we get a little taste before spring break in the state of Florida, but not this time. So Florida State's first practice, again, is tomorrow evening, and now we're going to take some questions from you here in the Warchant chat as to, well, if you got football, if you got anything else, feel free. For those of you that are just filing in, feel free in whatever means. I see some of you on Facebook, some of you on X/Twitter, on YouTube. Just fire a question in the chat. The last 20 minutes or so, we're going to be answering your queries. So Gator Kirk, how you doing from the 757? Hope everything's going okay. What is served at the luncheon? Go Noles. Okay, well, historically, and I'll get Ira's answer on today, it's been some sort of barbecue dish. Was it the same again today, Ira?
It sure was. It sure was. And the thing, what's funny about this is, sports writers can be the worst when it comes to like free food. Because like a lot of times things we cover, and it's a lot of media, you're working at events. So people that don't know, if we're covering a football game or a baseball game or basketball game, they'll feed their staff. And a lot of times they'll feed the media as well, because we're there for 5-6 hours. We can't get away to go get food. So they'll feed us, which is awesome. Sports writers sometimes will bitch about the food, and just because that's who sports writers are, they're going to find reasons to complain. But it's incredible that Mike Norvell does this, that Florida State does this, because a lot of schools don't do this anymore. It used to be very customary. Back in the day, they would have media luncheons and kind of have these situations. But Mike Norvell has kind of brought it back. A lot of schools don't do it. And to your point, it's a barbecue, which makes it convenient. People can go up through the line, get what they want, and it's not too cumbersome. It's just kind of a pick what you want and move on. And but yeah, it's a great event. We get to talk to all the assistant coaches. And like you said at the very beginning, if people haven't watched them yet, go to our YouTube channel and browse around, because Mike Norvell obviously spoke for almost a half hour, but then we have 10, 15, some cases longer interviews with all the assistant coaches.
I see Director Ben behind the scenes gave the banana pudding a solid 7 out of 10. That's good. All right. I don't know if you had that today. All right. Jason says and asks, how big of a year do you think Morlock has? Seems like he's poised for a big year given Mike's play calling. Chris Thompson had some interesting comments about Kyle Morlock today, Ira, talking about how the most important thing that he could have done this offseason was get in the gym and get stronger, right, so that he can become a quote-unquote dominant blocker. I love that. I love that assessment from his position coach, because he needs to get a little bit better at blocking, Ira. And if he does, I think that only multiplies his choices, but he's going to be a big-time player no matter what for Florida State this year, right?
Yeah, he definitely will be, but I think for his own personal development. And that, that was one comment, again, going back to those conversations we had with Adam Fuller. He said that we're not, because I think Corey or somebody, I think it might have been Corey, asked him about the combine, how gratifying it was to see those guys do well in the combine. And he said, well, what we're doing here is not just helping them develop to win us football games. We're helping them develop to become the best players they can be for their whole career. And so that's a perfect example. They could scheme around Kyle Morlock if he's not a great run blocker. And I think that's an area where he needs to get better. But if he's going to play tight end in the NFL, he needs to become a better run blocker. That was the knock on Jaheim Bell. That was the reason Jaheim Bell came to Florida State, was to get better at that. Then when he went to the Senior Bowl, they wanted to see more of it. He showed them that there. He felt like that really is going to help his stock when it goes to the NFL. You can't be a tight end that doesn't block, especially in the run blocking. Yeah. And so, I think that is something they want to see more out of Kyle. And I think it sounds like they're pretty happy with the work he's put in, but now he'll get to show it in the spring. But yeah, as far as a receiver, there's no question. He's got a chance to be that featured guy. Jaheim caught almost 40 passes last year. He was third on the team in receiving, and I think Kyle's going to be right there, if not more.
usually when you have a veteran player, and Kyle's played a lot of college football, 1 year at Florida State, like typically the position coach will say something about technique or about poise or something intangible. He's like, no, he had to hit the gym. I'm like, okay, that's awesome, because he has the frame that Jaheim didn't in terms of height too, which makes it more attractive for pro scouts. Wesley, what's going on west in the Villages? What's up, Tom and Ira? He asks. Nothing. What's your biggest takeaway from the luncheon interviews? See you all next month. Well, from afar, Ira, it's the confidence, steadfast confidence. This is the first luncheon I've not been to in Mike Norvell's era. But since I've been to all the others and I could feel it in the room, you could still see it today and compare it to the others. They think they got a really talented football team here. Like, it's almost like they can't wait for it to play out in the field, but they're excited about this group.
Yeah, and excited in a different way than maybe I might have expected, because I thought a lot of the excitement would be about these transfers, and they brought in some really nice transfers, and some of the returning players. I mean, Shaheem and Fentrell and some of these guys that have played a lot of football and played well, but it felt like across the board, a lot of their excitement was about the guys that we may not really expect, or that we might have forgotten about a little bit, and so that was cool to hear. Again, just the guys that maybe haven't started, but they feel like could be starters and played a ton of football. And, I asked Mike Norvell about, the offense having so many new faces and maybe take things slow. And he's like, yeah, we also have a lot of guys that played a lot of football. So I think that's part of it too. It's not, I think there's a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, because I think they believe there's some guys on this team that have been slept on, and they think that they're going to get a lot more out of those guys.
I found it interesting today, Ira, that, a lot of times in recent press conferences like these, Mike Norvell would talk about how young they are. It's almost like he wants to go the opposite of what the general consensus was, but he would talk about, well, we got a lot of young guys. And, with COVID eligibility, I always rolled my eyes like, really? They're all 20. They might say redshirt sophomore next to their name, but they're like 22, dude.
Fourth year of college, yeah.
And then this year they lose so many. He's like, we're kind of old. We got a lot of veterans. Says, okay, Mike, I appreciate that. Garrett PCL. This is a great topic that we haven't hit on today. What do we make of Julian Armella possibly moving to the interior? Alex Atkins did go on record today saying that Julian Armella at guard is going to be a thing, at least for the spring camp. What do you think about that, Ira?
Yeah, and it's something we had heard, and I think Aslan and I talked about it on Wake Up a week or two ago, that we thought that might be a move that they make. I really think it's to give Julian Armella as good a chance as possible to possibly get on the field. I mean, I think it also is something that could suit him well, his physical characteristics. But Alex Atkins made it clear it's not like it's necessarily a permanent move where he's never going back to tackle. This gives him a chance to really compete. They've got two wide open guard positions, and they've got some candidates. I mean, Keandre Jones is back. He's another guy that kind of falls in that category of, people weren't really talking about Keandre Jones, and Alex Atkins wanted to make sure to bring him up as a guy who has been here and played. But those guard positions are going to be pretty wide open, and they feel like Julian, I think, can really compete there. Whereas at tackle, I feel like they're pretty good. He really talked up Jeremiah Byers. Again, go watch these interviews, because Alex Atkins really talked up Jeremiah Byers and said that some interesting things about how much better he thinks he's going to be this year, not just because he's been in the system longer, but also he's more part of the program now. He's not a guy who just came in. He kind of gave you the inclination that maybe Jeremiah's mindset was, I'm going to go there, have a good year, and go to the NFL. But now he's more invested in the program, more invested in his teammates. They're more invested in him, and that's going to make him a better player, because that offensive line is so much about continuity and chemistry. It's not just about your physical ability. So, but yeah, I think it's a move that it gives him an opportunity to maybe see a clear path to maybe get on the field as soon as this season. But also it may work out well for him. I mean, Julian Armella is a talented kid. He has not been lights out in space at tackle, and maybe a guard, it might click for him. And sometimes you don't know. Remember, like, I don't think they knew. I doubt Rick Trickett or Jimbo Fisher knew when they moved, what's his name, to center. No, I was thinking later. No, the tackle they moved to center. Try again. One more guy they moved to center. Cam Irving. The chat would have told us in a second. Good job. I don't know that they knew that was going to work as well as it worked. And I remember when they did it thinking, what? And it was unbelievable. And so, I think you never know sometimes what you might hit on, but I think it's a good thing. It's good that Julian seems willing to do it.
that was the best that offensive line was in that 29-game stretch.
Right.
When Cam was center and they had Big Rod Johnson at left tackle. They switched it for the Miami game too. They're nuts. They it was the Miami game.
Yes. Yeah.
Ira, that was 10 years ago. Yikes. Starting to happen to me now when stuff like this goes down. It's starting to affect me. I'm going to stay with that Armella question for just a little bit longer here because this is so fascinating. Also talked up by Alex Atkins today was Jalen Early. I believe the question was, what's he ready for? And Atkins said something to the effect of everything, like all of it.
Now everything. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what a great answer that is. I find it interesting because Atkins had a lot to say today. The video on Warchant TV is almost 20 minutes long. And the talk about the tackle position that Rob Scott might be limited in spring. Again, he put that on the record. That's not us talking about injuries. It's the coaching staff. So with an opening at tackle, you still think about moving Julian Armella to guard. I find that very telling that they like what they have in Jalen Early. We'll see how much Lucas Simmons can rise up the ranks this camp. You already talked about it. Jeremiah Byers, they like him. And Alex Atkins was speaking glowingly about Jeremiah.
And Darius Washington.
It gives me a clue that they think, because Darius could play anywhere, Ira, and it gives me a clue that they think that Darius best suits this group at tackle. So when you're trying to put the pieces together, that's all fascinating. And then for Julian specifically, athletically, like they ran some weird screens when he was at tackle a couple years ago and he was with the threes and I think they were experimenting. Ira, he was almost getting to the spot on a screen on the perimeter block too fast. Like for what they ask for the athleticism out of the guards, like Julian has that for days. That's what gets so fascinating to me. But it's just there. You would think that maybe with an opening at tackle, some reps at least that could be had with a guy who might be limited. That Julian is still moving to the interior. So very, very fascinating. Can't wait to hear the reports from practice about that. Tomcat asks, what's your pick for the portal this spring? Okay, so what he's going shopping. Tomcat's going shopping. He's saying linebacker, wide receiver, defensive tackle. We'll go. Let's see. Ira, do you agree with those three positions? Disagree? Do you agree with that order? Disagree?
I agree. There's a good chance they'll go for linebacker, possibly defensive tackle. Again, I don't know that because of the versatility they have with some of those defensive ends that could maybe play defensive tackle, like Durjaye, that I don't know that it's an urgent need, but I could see them doing that. Wide receiver, I would not expect unless they lost a bunch of these guys who decide that they're not in the plans. They have a pretty deep wide receiver room. Now, if three of the older guys realize that they got passed over and they bail, then maybe I see it. But if it is what it is right now, I don't know that receivers can be a big option. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because they answered so many questions across all positions, like even specialists. Jalen Lucas, because he's listed as a running back, and he'll play on offense, but they brought him in as a specialist. So that's always a cheap answer I could give in the situation. It's like, well, if they find a great returner, then maybe they could bring that in. Linebacker, yeah. I think defensive tackle and then best player available. Like maybe one position is tight end if they don't have the answer that they like in the secondary tight end. Like Jackson West is a huge camp for him. It's a huge camp for Landon Thomas to impress as a freshman, Jarrell Powers and others, Brian Courtney. But they got to have another option. Like, what if Kyle Morlock's blocking is better but not great? Like what do they do? Do they look to the portal? So I might throw a tight end in that mix, but we'll see. The portal will be active. We know that much. This program certainly is. Keon Coleman wasn't a part of this program this time last year, Ira. So it could just be that they go get the best player out there. Jane asks, is Pro Day going to be covered by Warchant? Yes, it will. And Pro Day is this week, right?
Yeah, it'll be Friday. And we'll be out there. I think the biggest stories probably from a competing standpoint are going to be the guys that didn't run the 40, because all the guys that ran the 40 and did all the testing did really well. So Braden Fisk is not going to run the 40, I wouldn't imagine. Jarian Jones is not going to run the 40. Renardo Green, maybe, but probably not. But the guys who didn't, I think Keon Coleman, Fabian Lovett, Tatum Bethune, a few of those guys did not participate in some of the testing at the combine. And so I would think you'll see those guys. But yeah, we'll be there. It's not as easy to get the numbers as is at the combine. At the combine, the NFL staff is there and they give true numbers. When they do at Pro Day, the scouts are all doing it by hand timing, and it's we'll see what numbers we can get out, but we'll definitely be there, and it'll be a good group. It should be, again, there should be a ton of NFL head coaches and GMs. That's one way to measure the health of the program is who comes to the pro day. There were a few years there where there were not many head coach, maybe no head coaches, maybe one, and very few GMs. I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of head coaches and GMs at this pro day.
It is, and this isn't a Mike Norvell thing. It's just for any coach. This is one of the harder events for media access, just in general. It's kind of weird, and I think the snobbery level of the NFL scout on a day like a pro day, Ira, is rivaled only by maybe like at Wimbledon, the royal box that's at center court. Like they thumb their nose. They're like, get out of here, not NFL media. Or not NFL scouts. It's a little difficult, but we're going to have it covered head to toe. Whatever access we have, we're going to maximize it here at warchant.com, Warchant TV. Dan asks, with the NIL and kids transferring so much, do you think we will see more freshmen getting playing time so there's some experience to take over positions of need? They kind of do that already here at Florida State. It might be something that more institutions do, Dan, to prepare for any departures. But this is another payoff, Ira, of rotating as aggressively as they do. Sometimes it drives me nuts. But so on a day like today where they say we've got a ton of guys with experience, they're correct. They're right to say that because of the things that they do the year before.
You and Corey Clark. We're not big fans of the rotations on defense, particularly. And they forced it. I mean, they forced it. There's no question. They forced it last year with some of those young guys, Conrad Hussey, Nicholson, Cryer at times. The defensive ends getting, Byron Turner on the field more. And I think partly for that reason. And you don't know what your roster is going to look like from year to year. So they'll try to. Part of it's also going to depend on the schedule. One interesting kind of note when we were talking about the schedule to a couple of assistant coaches is, they've got the game in Ireland against Georgia Tech, which will be, season openers are always tricky because you don't know what the other team's putting in. Then they come back and play the Labor Day game against Boston College. I didn't even think about it. Boston College won't have played a game yet. Mm-hmm. And they've got a new coaching staff. So there's a lot of preparation and things that they've got to work on for some of these games early in the season. Memphis, man, that game, I've been concerned about that game, not because I think Florida State's going to lose it, just because I think it's going to be a real challenge because they've got a legitimate college quarterback who can really sling it around. And they're also a team that will not have played anybody decent before you play them. So I don't know how much, last year they had a veteran team that was very good and got control of games, and they felt comfortable playing those young guys.
Yeah.
This team, there's a lot of new faces, a lot of new, and I think some challenging games. So that I don't know that they're going to be able to do it as much this year. We'll see if they get games in hand. I think last year they knew in most of those games that they were never in danger. Even if it felt like the game was kind of close. Yeah. I don't know if this team is the same. We'll see.
The patience of Coach Hamilton in some of those circumstances. I felt a through line there. You're like, man, there's a payoff. And the payoff to me was how fresh they looked in Gainesville, how fresh they looked in the ACC championship. And then 100%. Here's a secondary payoff for it. But this plays at risk. This drives at risk, man. I don't think it has to be. But this is the calculus that a coach gets paid to do. And so therefore here we are. Lee asks, guys, it looks like all the skill position players in offense are really fast, but also the O-line is big and physical. Are the stars aligning? So I'll ask you, Ira, just maybe from Tour of Duty, what you've seen. The film footage showed it. Like, looks like Richie Leonard can really run. Like he's a good athlete. I'm not going to fall for the Byers thing like I did last year, but that's these two guys they brought in, Ferguson and Leonard from the SEC, 320 plus, and they look athletic for interior players.
Yeah, I'm definitely pretty convinced about Richie Leonard. Ferguson, I just need to see more of. I wasn't blown away by him. I mean, his size is impressive. I wasn't blown away by the way he moved at Tour of Duty, but again, that's not really made for offensive linemen. Certainly 330-pound offensive linemen. So we'll see what he looks like in practices. But yeah, man, there's a lot of potential for that offensive line to be a lot better than what it was a year ago. And Alex Atkins talked about that today. Again, we're talking about Jeremiah Byers, how much better he's going to be this year. Keandre Jones is probably going to be similar. It's his second year in the program. And then you talked about Jalen Early. We touched on it briefly earlier. The way he answered that question about Jalen Early, and then Darius Washington was first team All-ACC last year. Maurice is back. So you're just talking about a group that could be a lot better than last year, even though I don't know if people are expecting that because people were not happy with the way the offensive line played last year overall compared to what they were expecting. And so now people are kind of diminishing it a little bit, and they may actually be a lot better than we think.
A couple of questions remain. Sorry if we didn't get to everybody. We had to skip a couple because we're running up against time for tonight. But Brett, penultimate question. Can we have a running back by committee? 3 guys. Holmes 2, Cam 3. So I'm assuming he's assuming Roydell's number 1.
Or Toafili.
Or Toafili. I think you have to assume. I think that's the way they're going is with a running back by committee. Ira, what say you?
Yeah, I think it'll be 4 or 5 guys. Yeah, for sure. I mean, at least the top 3 or 4 will all play a lot. They like Keziah Holmes a lot. I think Roydell's going to be a star. I really think he's going to be really, really good. He's not. And Alex Atkins made a point to say he doesn't run, or it might have been Coach Yak, David Johnson, the running backs coach. One of them said he's not like Trey Benson exactly, so they're going to modify things based on the running backs they have. But I like what we've seen out of Roydell Williams, just the physicality, the strength and toughness he's got. And then you look at Cam Davis certainly has that build. LT, we've seen the speed. Then you've got Singleton kid, Keziah Holmes. You've got the other young backs they've got. It's an impressive group, but yeah, I think it's not going to be as clear cut as I think it was for most of the last year and a half that Trey Benson was the guy.
They, even when Trey was the guy, like the hot hand at times too. So I think that's fair to expect, Brett. Final question from David. Does DJ at quarterback become a big weapon for the offense? And you could look at this a couple of different ways, Ira, either with the cannon for the arm and the speed that they brought in, which, as you said, multiple coaches brought up today that was a goal of theirs. But then also as a battering ram. Tony Tokar's, hinted not so subtly that he likes the idea of using that part of DJ's game. Yeah, it's going to look different than Jordan, but what do you think about weaponizing DJU rather than just having him run an offense or manage a game?
Yeah, one thing I thought was interesting, also another comment from Alex Atkins when he talked about, I think Aslan asked him about the quarterbackification system. And, that was one thing that Mike Norvell, when we talked to him, and I meant to ask him about it today, we will this week. But, last fall when that got proposed, he wasn't in favor of it. He liked the part of the game where the quarterback has to learn your offense and has to be able to go to the line and make checks and get you in the right plays. He likes that part of the game. And I think part of the reason he likes it is I think he thinks he does it well and he teaches his quarterbacks well, and he feels like that's an advantage. So now they've passed that rule, and schools are going to have the opportunity to have the quarterback communication, electronic communication during games. And I thought Alex Atkins made a good point about that. Was like, yeah, I mean, Jordan Travis knew the offense so well because he had been in it for 4 years that he got them in the right play. He said over 90% of the time when Jordan had a decision to make about what play to get them into, he made the right decision. Well, that's a huge weapon. Yeah. DJ's not going to have that knowledge. He's just not going to have that experience. I think he's played in 4 offenses now because Clemson had changed while he was there, right? Didn't it change while he was there? Or
it might have been co-coordinator leaves, and then he has the second co-coordinator, and then there was
at least his 3rd offense. Yep. And he's, he'll have been here for, one off season. So he's not going to be as adept, but Alex Atkins pointed out, well, we're going to take advantage of that ability to use the headset and communicate with him. And he's a smart kid. So I think he's going to play well, man. I'm excited about DJ. I think he's going to have a good season. I think Mike Norvell is going to be really good for him, and Tony Tokar's. I think they're going to do a really good job for him. I think DJ was smart to come to Florida State for those reasons and because of the weapons around him. But as far as a weapon running, yeah, man, the way I took note of it just like you did, the way Tony Tokar's kind of got excited talking about that is, and I've never covered a quarterback like that. Florida State, since I've been covering Florida State, has never had that guy. I think EJ Manuel could have been that guy, but it didn't seem like he or Jimbo really wanted him to be that guy. Yeah. So and I've always admired it, because you see these other teams. Again, I'm not comparing him to Cam Newton or Tim Tebow and their running ability, but it's such a force. It's so demoralizing for a defense. It's got to be when you get the other team in 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 4, and it doesn't matter what you really call, they're going to run quarterback power, and you're in trouble. And Florida State's going to take advantage of that. DJ, I think, wants that. So that I definitely think that's going to be a big weapon.
Yeah, he showed that at Oregon State, the propensity to run dudes over. He has a sense of the timing for it too. I would agree with you, Ira, just looking back in Florida State history, backup EJ Manuel spot starter
Right.
Christian Ponder, EJ Manuel,
Right.
was a running force. I remember the game on the road at Wake Forest. Good Lord. Went up and down the field on the road. But towards the end of his career, more pocket passer. There are just so many things to sort out, and that's the best part about camp. I'm so jazzed for this, and again, it starts tomorrow. About the time that Florida State and Stetson begin on ACC Network Extra, the first pitch, you should be seeing some film from practice from Aslan, from Ben. You're getting footage of day one of Florida State camp here on Warchant TV, and then a little bit later on in the evening, you'll have interviews around 7 o'clock here live on Warchant TV. We do have a live reaction show. I'll be getting the opinions of 2 of our staff members at Warchant who are on the grounds watching practice and see what they thought of day one of Florida State spring camp in 2024. Between now and then on the channel, we've got Seminole Headlines. That's tomorrow at 1 o'clock, as always, here on Warchant TV. And Ira, I mean, I think it's kind of obvious, but what's coming up on the website in the next day or 3?
Yeah, plenty of football coverage. But so let me ask you a question. We still have the $1 for a month trial, like for new subscribers, right?
That
I
is
believe
correct.
that's still in effect. So somebody could start a new subscription for the $1 to get in for a month, get spring practice coverage, get the promo code to go to Garnet and Gold and get their baseball gear 25% off.
Mm-hmm.
This is a cheat code here at warchant.com.
Oh my God, it pays you back. You're going to love it so much. The coverage quality too. You say, you know what? I'm going to stick around. These guys are awesome. These guys are awesome. They do a great job of coverage. But yes, get you one of these tomorrow. This is the away uni. I love it. I love it so. They're going to be wearing it this weekend at Clemson. We didn't even have time to talk about that program that's kicking butt, Ira. So impressive what's going on with Link Jarrett and Florida State's 18-0 start to the season. Congratulations to D1 Baseball for ranking Florida State in their top 25. I saw they still have the 7-loss Florida Gators and at number 7, I think.
Number 6, I think.
Number 6.
I believe.
One ranking better than the amount of losses they had. I put out a tweet like that last week, Ira, that I was just kind of kidding. I didn't think they'd actually do it. They're nuts, but that's okay. Florida State continues to get the respect it deserves.
Yeah, they're playing great, and they also have huge series, like you said, that Clemson series this weekend. 2 top 10 teams. I mean, it's going to be a great battle, and it'll give Florida State a chance to really show what they are, because that's a hostile place. Clemson's baseball stadium. When you talk to players that have played there, Clemson's softball fans too, by the way, but Clemson's baseball players will say that, or Florida State's baseball players through the years have said Clemson's probably the toughest place to play in terms of the crowd. It's understandable. It's kind of like for opposing fans when they come into Hauser. So, but maybe with Clemson's got a little less class probably, but it'll be a great test, man. If they come out of that series with a couple of wins, you'll know this team's really legit.
Yeah, Florida is a test that's like that, and that's good that they passed it, but I mean, this is a team that runs hot, especially some of those pitchers on the weekend. So it'll be interesting to see how they react to perhaps a hostile environment. Cam Leiter's not afraid, so we'll see.
Neither is Jamie Arnold.
You're correct. Neither is Jamie Arnold. We're not afraid of giving you the best coverage here on Warchant.com, Warchant TV. Please hit the like button on the way out. Subscribe to the channel. If you missed anything, we also post the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis on the podcast feed. A lot of stuff ahead for Florida State. We hope that you head to the website now or to the channel, take a look at all those videos. We've got tons of coverage. Thanks to Director Ben behind the scenes. Thanks, as always, to State Farm agent Russ Voorhis for his sponsorship. Thanks to you, Ira. Good luck tomorrow. Bring the sunscreen.
Sorry about my internet. It'll never happen again.
We're good. We powered through. It's the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. Thanks for stopping by, everybody.